Imagine standing alone on a frozen mountain. The wind is screaming so loudly that it drowns out your own heartbeat. Snow stings your face like thousands of tiny needles. Around you stretches an endless white wilderness, where temperatures plunge below -30 degrees Celsius, and help is days away. Now imagine voluntarily cutting your way out of your own tent in the middle of that freezing night, without putting on your boots. That is exactly what happened to 9 experienced hikers in the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia in the winter of 1959. More than 60 years later, scientists, historians, mountaineers, and investigators have searched for answers. Yet one haunting question still echoes across those icy slopes. What frightened 9 skilled adventurers enough to abandon their only shelter and walk into certain death? This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. It begins not with fear, but with excitement. In January 1959, a group of 10 young hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on an ambitious expedition across the northern Ural Mountains. They weren't reckless thrill seekers. They were experienced skiers, engineers, students, and outdoor enthusiasts who had completed difficult expeditions before. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. Calm, disciplined, and respected by everyone in the group, Dyatlov planned the journey with military precision. Their goal was to earn the highest certification available for long-distance winter hiking in the Soviet Union. The route would be difficult, remote, dangerous, but entirely within their capabilities. As they boarded trains, traveled through small villages, and finally reached the snowy wilderness, spirits were high. They joked with each other. They sang songs. They took photographs that still survive today. Looking at those smiling faces now is strangely unsettling, because every single photograph captures people who had absolutely no idea they were taking some of the final images of their lives. One member of the team, Yuri Yudin, became ill before reaching the most difficult part of the route. Reluctantly, he turned back. It was a decision that would save his life. The remaining 9 hikers continued deeper into the mountains. None of them would ever return. As February began, weather conditions worsened dramatically. Powerful winds swept across the slopes, visibility dropped, snow buried familiar landmarks. At some point, the group drifted off their intended route and found themselves on the eastern shoulder of a mountain known by the local Mansi people as Kholat Syakhl. It is often translated as Dead Mountain. Despite the ominous name, historians cautioned that it likely referred to the mountain's barren landscape rather than any supernatural legend. Late that afternoon, instead of descending into the shelter of a nearby forest, the group decided to pitch their tent directly on the exposed mountainside. Investigators have long debated why. Some believe they wanted to avoid losing altitude and time. Others suggest worsening visibility prevented them from safely navigating farther. Whatever their reason, that decision placed them in one of the harshest environments imaginable. Then, something happened. No one knows exactly what, but the evidence discovered weeks later would become one of history's greatest mysteries. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, concern gradually grew. Search parties were finally organized. Students, soldiers, volunteers, and aircraft began combing the frozen wilderness. On February 26th, searchers found the tent. It was still partially standing beneath the snow. Inside, most of the group's warm clothing remained neatly arranged. Food was still there. Personal belongings had been left behind. The stove remained inside, but the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. The tent had been cut open from the inside. Instead of leaving through the entrance, someone had slashed through the fabric and climbed directly into the freezing darkness. Why? Outside the tent, investigators found footprints leading downhill. Some people were barefoot. Others were only socks. A few appeared to have a single shoe. The footprints suggested they hadn't been running wildly. They had walked, calmly, into temperatures cold enough to kill within hours. Following those tracks, rescuers eventually reached the edge of a forest. There, beneath a large cedar tree, they found the first two bodies, Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. Both wore very little clothing. Nearby were the remains of a small fire. They had apparently tried desperately to keep alive. The cedar's branches were broken, several meters above the ground. Someone had climbed high into the tree, perhaps to look for the others, or perhaps to see whatever had driven them from the tent. No one can say. Days later, 3 more bodies were found. Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Komogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. Each lay at different points between the cedar tree and the abandoned tent. It looked as though they had been trying to return. They never made it. The remaining 4 hikers were not discovered until May, after melting snow revealed a ravine deeper within the forest. Their injuries shocked investigators. Some had multiple fractured ribs. One suffered severe skull trauma. The force required to produce such injuries was described as comparable to a major vehicle collision. Yet strangely, there were almost no corresponding external wounds. No deep cuts, no obvious signs of a violent struggle. One victim was missing her tongue. Another had missing soft tissue from parts of the face. Modern forensic experts have suggested that natural decomposition in flowing water and scavenging animals can explain much of that damage, but at the time, these findings fueled decades of speculation. The questions only multiplied. Why leave the safety of the tent? Why without proper clothing? Why separate into different groups? Why attempt to return? What caused devastating internal injuries? Over the years, countless theories emerged. Some blamed escaped prisoners. Others suspected secret Soviet military experiments. There were claims of mysterious lights in the sky, whispers of classified weapons tests. Even stories involving unknown creatures or paranormal forces found eager audiences. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and despite decades of speculation, none of those dramatic theories has been supported by convincing historical evidence. Scientists approached the mystery differently. Could powerful winds have created terrifying low-frequency sounds that induced panic? The idea attracted attention, but evidence remains limited. Could a hidden snow collapse have threatened the tent? For many years, critics dismissed the avalanche theory because the slope appeared too gentle. Then, in 2021, researchers published a new study suggesting that a delayed slab avalanche, combined with the way snow accumulated after the hikers cut into the slope, could plausibly explain why they suddenly abandoned the tent and why some later suffered crushing injuries. The theory doesn't answer every question, but it explains more of the physical evidence than many earlier ideas. Still, not everyone agrees. Some mountaineers argue the terrain doesn't fully match the model. Others believe multiple factors were involved. Perhaps fear, confusion, extreme weather, darkness, and human decisions made under unimaginable stress. Maybe there was never one single mystery. Maybe there were several. As the years passed, the Soviet investigation was quietly closed with a vague conclusion. The hikers, officials wrote, had died because of an unknown compelling force. Even today, those words continue to fascinate millions. The Dyatlov Pass incident reminds us of something deeply human. We often imagine that every mystery has an answer waiting to be discovered, that if we gather enough evidence, ask enough questions, or invent better technology, the truth will eventually reveal itself. But history doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, nature erases the final clues, witnesses disappear, memories fade. Snow keeps its secrets. The mountain where these 9 young people lost their lives has become a place of remembrance rather than myth. Their families, friends, and fellow adventurers remember them not as characters in a horror story, but as intelligent, courageous people who set out on an extraordinary journey and never came home. Perhaps that is the real tragedy. Not that we still don't know every detail, but that 9 ordinary lives became one of history's greatest mysteries. And somewhere, beneath the endless winds of the northern Urals, the mountain remains silent, as it has since that winter night in 1959. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please take a moment to like this video, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe for more fascinating documentaries exploring the world's greatest civilizations, untold stories, and enduring mysteries. Thank you for watching. Until our next journey through time, stay curious.